Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee on this Tuesday as we watch a large area of rain and some embedded heavier rains in the mid-Atlantic states and down into coastal North Carolina and then back over into the Ohio Valley and Tennessee Valley, moving east-northeastward. So we're going to see all this rain spreading up to the northeast. The big question is going to be whether there is going to be enough what we would call dynamic cooling, in other words, cooling in the atmosphere from the top down, rather than having all the layers of the atmosphere cold enough for snow. This is one of those work in progress type situations, and whether that's going to mean for some accumulating wet snows across the northern parts of Pennsylvania, particularly northeastern Pennsylvania, northwestern New Jersey, the Hudson Valley of New York. Once you get inland of the coast by about a good 20 or 30 miles, and then in interior Connecticut, especially in and around Route 84, maybe down a little bit further south than that, and then extending up to the north. And of course, there'll be some snows through parts of upstate New York as well. Let me show you what's going on at the surface, because we have low pressure that is now moving into northern Alabama, central Tennessee, and there's a trailing warm front. And you can see how the isobars, actually that low is a little further north, judging by the pressure field that's being drawn. I don't know why sometimes the map doesn't, the automated map doesn't put the low in the right spot, but it's probably somewhere closer to Knoxville. And there's a trailing warm front, and you can pick it out. I'll zoom in a little bit here. A lot of times in all the stuff that's going on weather-wise, the people putting up models and everything, they lose sight of what's going on in real time. And, we have a low that's right here, and we can kind of tell that by the fact that there's a south-southeast wind at Frankfurt. There's a west-northwest wind at Louisville. There's a northwest wind at Nashville. So somewhere in here, there's a bit of an elongated low of some sort. And there's a trailing warm front, and you can pick that out because temperatures south of that warm front are in the middle to upper 70s, and north of that front, they cool off into the 50s and even the 40s in North Carolina. So that's creating quite a temperature contrast over a relatively short distance, and that the isobars are bagging out toward the coast. You can see it right there in that yellow line. So there's probably another low center that's trying to develop in southeastern Georgia that's going to eventually become the primary low as it heads off North Carolina and off the Virginia coast. Now, let me show you what happens here on the NAM model as we go through the day. Now, we're into 5 o'clock this afternoon. You start to see this expanding area of dark blue. That's all snow, heavy wet snow, particularly in elevated areas. And that area expands then into northwestern New Jersey, into parts of the Hudson Valley, and into western Connecticut. Again, figure along or just south, if you just go just south of Route 84 and then northward, and then we get that wet snow into the early morning hours. Along the coast, it's rain. And the models last night backed off on the amount of moisture, and that was important because you need the intensity of the precipitation in order to cool the atmosphere down. And today's run seemed to have gone back in the other direction. And judging by the radar, I think that kind of makes sense. What you have to be really careful in a situation like this is that if the model underdoes the intensity of the precip, that somebody could wind up with a bit of a surprise. I'm going to take a look now. This is the NAM model, but it's the 4-kilometer version. It's a tighter spacing of grid, so there's more data in it. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not so good. But you can see it has kind of the same idea with the darker blues across northwest New Jersey into the Hudson Valley. And notice there's also some pockets of green in there. So, the atmosphere is not cooling down evenly. You have marginal cold air here. So, we're talking about a degree here, a degree there, even a half a degree or even a tenth of a degree could make a difference. And then that rolls along to the east. And then by the time we get into tomorrow, of course, weather conditions begin to improve some as we await the arrival of cooler air. Now, one thing the NAM model is doing and continues to do, which the other models are not doing, is that it's showing a little bit of a wave developing on this polar front that's coming through for Thursday. So there's another band of rain and snow showers, more rain showers than anything else. So it's kind of saying that it needs one more wave to really pull down the cold air that's setting up to the north. And you can see by Thursday night, we're getting some lake effect snows up in upstate New York on the eastern shores of Lake Ontario, around Watertown, Pulaski, north of Syracuse. This is on the NAM 4, so we're going to go to back to the more common 12 kilometer, and you can see there's a large area of lake effect snows that take shape there, and they get pretty heavy for upstate New York during Thursday night into Friday morning. So there'll be bands coming off the lake, and in the meantime, we just turn colder through all of this. So let's go to the GFS, because I want to look at the longer term here. It is going to get cold for a little bit in the east, and of course I know a lot of you are in other parts of the country, so you want to take a look at that. And so we'll back it up, and here's that first wave. Now the GFS is a little kind of flatter in its look, so it doesn't really show the precip intensity as well. But you notice there's no real second wave, and you can barely find it. So the cold air just comes basically, come flooding in and slowly, and just takes over as we go through the rest of the weekend into the weekend. But it does bring out low pressure from the northern Rockies. You can see it here in Wyoming with snows in Montana into the Dakotas and into western Wyoming, skimming northern Colorado, eventually more snow into the Dakotas and Minnesota, and on up into the Great Lakes as it takes a low a little further north here up toward Lake Superior, and there's a trailing front from that low that runs down into the Ohio Valley, and it brings some precipitation to the northeast. It'll be rain at the coast and probably some snow inland. The European wanted to make this weaker and have another wave on the southern end of this last night, so we'll have to see if that's real. And then it gets cold behind that again, and then there's another wave. And by the way, prior runs, this is going to produce also some snow, some front-end snow for Chicago Saturday night into Sunday morning. You can see it there. Whether it changes to rain or not remains to be seen, but for the Great Lakes, it looks like a pretty good snow there. And then the next front moves through on Monday. It turns colder again, and then we have another weather front with Arctic air behind that. That's very cold air coming in to Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, and the Western Lakes. Only have out now to day 7 so far. And with respect to the European, in terms of the longer term, I just want to show you, there's a few things going on here that bear watching. First off, we have, let me just plug this up here and we'll draw, but you can see there's a trough here, but we have a big upper high up in Alaska, so that's kind of feeding down colder, opening up the alleyway for some colder air. You still have this active Pacific jet that's coming in, and you've got weather systems along that are trailing along. And as we move through time, another deep vortex forms in southern Canada here, just south of Hudson's Bay. It's a little bit on the flat side, and what I mean is that it's kind of more elongated east-west than north-south, so the cold air comes in this way. It doesn't get as far south as perhaps this first shot does, but you still pretty much have the same idea, and this upper high is kind of locking in a flow here out of the cold, up from the pole down into Western Canada. So it basically floods Western Canada with cold air over time. The question is what happens after this. If there's no blocking, this vortex pulls out, or is it going to pull out and you're going to get a ridge that's going to build here in the eastern states? Is the next vortex going to drop a deep trough further west than before? That's a tough call. So you can see it here at 240 hours. The European kind of wants to keep that colder flow here opened up in the longer range, and it doesn't really change things too much because you've got this big upper high. It's kind of it's a blocking high there. You have a little bit of ridging out in the Atlantic toward Greenland. So, for the longer term, I think it's in flux, and there's, it's going to leave for a lot of uncertainty going forward with regards to how everything starts to set up for the second half of the month of December. We're not even through the first half, so we're already starting to look ahead to the second half. Let's go back. I just want to take a look Maybe if we have the latest HRRR model, which is this ultra short range model. And all right, it doesn't have the latest one's a little bit delayed. So I'll go to the one right before that, which was from 9 o'clock this morning. This model is very, very short range. It comes out every hour, which in some, when I was young and getting into the industry back in the late 70s, early 80s, we dreamt of a day where there would be models coming out every hour, and we used to laugh at ourselves that that was just such nonsense. And sure enough, that's what we have. Now, the HRRR model is a little bit warmer, so it doesn't really do as much, or at least the earlier runs did not do as much with the idea of the changeover to wet snow with this system. So, we're going to have to just wait and see now how it plays in terms of how intense the precip is later today. The atmosphere is borderline cold. There's going to be some cold air developing aloft because of this low that's developing off the mid-Atlantic coast. So let's see if we wind up with another surprise in some of the higher elevations across eastern and northeastern Pennsylvania, northwest New Jersey, the Hudson Valley of New York, and a good chunk of interior Connecticut. For the latest forecasts, you can download my app, which is free, and you can subscribe to my forecasts, which is just $1 a month, and I cover the zones of New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, the Hudson Valley of New York, and eastern Pennsylvania. That's all of New Jersey from south to north. Again, that's just 99 cents a month for whatever zone you happen to be in. And of course, you can check out the latest snowfall forecast maps on the website meteorologistjoechaffe.com. And of course, we have ssstormchasers.com for all your storm chasing needs.